My name is Adám Tóth, and I'm a researcher at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, but you can hear that my name is not that Dutch at all, because I'm Hungarian originally. And yeah, today I will guide you to the future, I hope, because that's our title of the presentation, Imagine Futures. And during this presentation, I will highlight some key drivers of the change, and I will also ask you to sort of be involved in shaping the future. What are the key drivers in this fast changing period of time? Okay, I see my slides. They're not there. Okay, and it's not moving. Yes. So just as a brief introduction, of course, we are here in Europe, and of course everything is regulated by the European Union and the Commission as well. And of course, one of the key elements to discuss is the European educational landscape, and which is basically governed by the European education area. And within that, of course, we could see that micro-credentials are key. In terms of, for instance, transition in green and digital economy, but also sustainability, how to deal with all these current future challenges. And then at the same time, we could see that micro-credentials are nice tools to enable to acquire, update, and improve knowledge, skills, and also competencies. And as I already mentioned, we are here representing a European University Alliance, which is called CHARM. And the European Commission also highlighted the key importance of European University Alliances in that transition when it comes to the implementation of micro-credentials. So, what is the European education area? If you go to the communications of the EC and EU, you can find some really nice topics and terms that most probably are the drivers of the change. And one of these, as you can see, and that's why we are all here, is micro-credential. The next one is actually all about active learning, and it's phrased as mastering transversal skills such as critical thinking, entrepreneurship, creativity, civic engagement through transdisciplinary, learner-centered, and challenge-based approaches. And lastly, it's also about sustainability and sustainability competencies, and it's framed like supporting sustainability transitions through integrating environmental sustainability perspectives across natural and human sciences. So I would say these are the sort of deduced themes when it comes to the drivers of the change. But if you look at the other considerations here in the EU, you can see there are so many other acts, initiatives including Mobility Agenda, AI Act, the Green Deal, the GreenComp, the sustainability competencies. So I would say also mobility and artificial intelligence are key themes and topics when it comes to the drivers of change. So if we combine all these four, of course, next to micro-credentials, we can create various future scenarios, and that's what we will do during this presentation. So we go one by one, pairing micro-credentials with one of these drivers of change. Before going to the futures, first I will present the present. So what is happening currently, and then what could be the future like? So let's start with the micro-credentials and sustainability. So we analyzed already existing micro-credentials here in Europe. The sample size was 22 across the European Union. And here you can see the GreenComp sustainability competencies and how many of those are addressed in micro-credentials. And you can see that, for instance, envisioning sustainable futures is a leading competency area when it comes to the GreenComp framework. However, embodying sustainability values are not really addressed in these micro-credentials. And we also had a discussion, probably values is not something that you can address in a micro learning program. Rather, for that, you need longer period of time to sort of have and practice all those sustainability values. But we can see that there are these GreenComp competencies addressed. But what if? So let's go to the future, and for that we use the future scenarios building framework. For that you need two drivers, and then those are on a gradient, so low and high, or strong or weak. And of course the key component here is the uptake of micro-credentials, so from low to high. And on the other axis, here we analyze the promotion of sustainability, whether it's weak or strong. And because of these two drivers and these two axes, we have 4 scenarios, of course. So let's start with the low uptake of micro-credentials and weak sustainability promotion. And that's what we can call as a stagnant education. So we don't really focus on sustainability expertise, probably because of political changes and political importance, and then all these geopolitical happenings currently, and we don't really do micro-credentials. But if we imagine that sustainability is something important, then we can go to the so-called green gap scenario, which is actually the sustainability expertise is really promoted, but we don't really do micro-credentials, so still in traditional degrees. However, if we go to the upper part of the image where the uptake of micro-credentials is high, you can see we might have a scenario when it's actually the greenwashed credentials scenario, where we don't really address the sustainability competencies, but we try to frame those as they address sustainability, but in fact they are not addressing that. And probably the most prospective future scenario could be the sustainable skills revolution, when the education area becomes a global leader in green micro-credential based education. So these are the scenarios which could be real, but which one? That's the main question. I believe now we are somewhere there at the green gap scenario, because we do have traditional degrees offering sustainability expertise and also GreenComp competencies, but we are not practicing micro-credentials that much. Of course, it varies from region to region and from university to university. Let's move on to the next driver, which is the active learning. So by active learning, we can list a couple of good examples, like problem-solving skills, also simulations, learning labs, peer instructions, debate and discussions. And based on our analysis, active learning is actually practiced. So around 70% of the sampled micro-credentials do apply active learning pedagogies. And here you can see some examples from the micro-credential descriptions. And a nice and interesting fact that actually 90% of the higher ranking universities apply active learning pedagogies, but the lower ranking universities only partly apply active learning pedagogies, which might be a correlation, I would say. But what is the future? So again, the same axis, but now it's about the active learning uptake, low or high. So yeah, we might have the case when we need to go back to the lecture hall. So with the traditional training, with the passive learning, I'm from Eastern Europe, so we know that type of education, not like in Western Europe. And then for the uptake of active learning, as you can see, AI names it as the passive pathway, because the pedagogical reform is supported, but then actually there is a lack of modular learning. So we still do those pedagogies in traditional degrees. And then if we go to the high uptake of micro-credentials, but still low active learning pedagogies, we might have the digital degree factory, because we don't really do active learning, so probably it will stay online, and then there is not much of interaction among the learners. And probably the best, or I mean, it's up to you to decide, could be the agile academy with a high level of implementation of micro-credentials and also the high level of implementation of active learning pedagogies. I believe now we are somewhere there, back to the lecture hall scenario, because active learning pedagogies, as you could see, are applied, but not as much as we should. And of course, micro-credentials are not very much applied in higher education. Let's move on to mobility. So we could see that the analyzed micro-credentials do not have a mobility component embedded, but of course you can do that. So for instance, virtual mobility is an easy way to embed mobility. But we could also see that there are some micro-credentials linked to BIPs, so blended intensive learning programs. And the main point here, I think, and that's where we need some discussion with the Commission. So how to fund those programs, which are short-term learning programs, but they require mobility. And for that, we also developed some scenarios within that. So for instance, what is the relation between a micro-credential and the mobility? So it could be before the mobility, it could be part of the micro-credential, or a micro-credential is part of the mobility, or these are the very same. So in that way, for instance, a BIP is a good example, because that's like a short defined unit and you go on mobility. So let's see again the future. The same structure. So with the weak support for mobility and with the low uptake of micro-credentials, we might be at the fortress academia scenario. So we are sort of logged in the classroom. With the support of mobility, that could be the Erasmus Forever scenario. So we do traditional learning mobility, but not focused on micro-credentials. And then with the high uptake of micro-credentials, but very low support for mobility, that could be the digital divide, because again, you cannot actually move, only virtual mobility is allowed and embedded. And then again, the last scenario could be the European Learning Passport, when you basically do, and then you collect all the micro-credentials during your learning. In my view, we are somewhere there at the Erasmus Forever scenario, because that's basically the practice currently. And yeah, because we don't really offer micro-credentials, and they are not financed, the micro-credentials, I mean the mobility. And lastly, artificial intelligence, AI, cannot be neglected. So of course, there are a lot of micro-credentials already provided on AI itself. But then, of course, as we could see from the keynote from Coursera, you can use it for whatever, optimizing assessment, curriculum design as well. So let's see again the scenarios. With the low uptake and the low integration, Fortress Academia 2.0. So we do business as usual, no innovation. But if you integrate AI, but the micro-credentials are still not very well embedded, that's the scenario of the human touch. So you still need to do a lot of administration, for instance, or even the design of those micro-credentials, but at least AI is somewhere there, maybe as a mentor or as a coach, as we could see. With the high uptake of micro-credentials, but and the low integration of AI, that could be the credential chaos, right? We offer too many, but then we don't really know how to connect those and how to organize the credentialing part. And then the last scenario could be the AI-driven learning hub, when everything is optimized, the learning, the credentialing, whatever activity of the micro-credentials are linked to AI. I think we are somewhere in the Fortress Academia 2.0, because, yeah, we don't really involve AI so far in the education. Of course, we must. And of course, micro-credentials are still not that involved in higher education. So we could see that there is actually a conceptual alignment among all these drivers. You can see the various categories. So skills, when it comes to skills, these are very much aligned. Also the personal, individualized growth is there, collaboration, and also the relevance. Because of the time, I go to the ultimate scenario, because these scenarios could be combined. So let's do that. And let's take the most ambitious scenario, and that could result in the smart, sustainable, and borderless learning ecosystem. With modular, skill-based education, with maximum flexibility, AI-verified micro-credentials, you can read all these really nice and appealing terms, but then as a discussion, I'm putting here some questions to you, and that's why I think it's good to have some discussion. I hope we have. So do we want actually this scenario to happen? Where are we in this transition, for instance? How long would it take to reach, and what steps are required, and what are the barriers, or are there any priorities within this scenario? Or on the other hand, too many irons in the fire. We are focusing on too many aspects of this future vision. So will employers value micro-credential-based education? Should GreenComp, the competency of the EU framework, be widely accepted? Do we want to be reliant on AI in whatever sense when it comes to micro-credentials? And how feasible is active learning in all disciplines? And what is the future of the mobility schemes? That's also a really good question. So I would say the ultimate discussion question here is this combined scenario realistic, or is it just a vision of the European education area? And what other scenarios could you imagine? And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.